Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I'm honored to welcome someone who has an incredible story. He's a centenarian, originally from Casablanca. He served 40 years with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, where he played a pivotal role in administration and operations. His work carried him across 4 continents, supporting large-scale infrastructure and construction projects that were critical to America's military and diplomatic presence abroad. He helped found the Em Habanim Sephardic Congregation in the San Fernando Valley, where he has also served as chairman of the board of trustees. And he's also the author of the book, As Time Goes By, A Life's Journey from Casablanca. Please help me welcome Sidney Chriqui, Sidney, thanks so much for joining me.
I thank you. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
Well, Sidney, from everything I've read about you is fascinating, but I want to start by going back with you to the beginning. So you were born in Morocco. I want to know first, what was your family life like then, in particular with regard to Judaism? Was your family observant?
My family was very observant, particularly my mother, since she was the daughter of a rabbi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he didn't have any boys. He had 3 daughters. My mother was the oldest one, and she was in charge of the other 2, and he taught her whatever he knew, and left her his books when he passed away. Mm-hmm. And my mother was therefore the head of the family when he passed away.
Well, so your books begins in Morocco. So it was during a time of significant historical change. So what memories do you stand out from your family life, traditions? And I'm also interested in the Jewish community there. What was the Jewish community like?
The Jewish community was large, something around 300,000 at the time.
Okay.
Of course, I left Morocco when I was 22, but all my youth was in Morocco. Mm-hmm. It was very observant. The French landed in Morocco in 1912.
I'm going to ask about that, but I just first, before I get to that, what was the Jewish community like? Very close, very tight knit?
Yes, it was very close and very observant, and they would be helping each other.
So
we didn't have everything, of course, that they had in Europe, but it was a second great country at the time when it was when we arrived, the Jews from Spain. Mm-hmm. And my ancestors were speaking Arabic.
Wow. So, because your journey, I mean, it spans major world events, I mean, including World War II. So before we get to the Allies, I mean, what personal experiences did you have during the war years in Morocco? Did you feel the war going on where you were, or no?
At the age of 15 approximately, France was at war. It was 1939. It was not. I was 14. France entered the war against Italy and Germany.
Right.
They had a pact with Poland, and when the war happened, the Muslims in Morocco helped the French a lot during the war in 1939, by sending troops to assist the French army. Our situation was the same. We were subject of the Sultan, who was not called the king at the time, was called the Sultan of Morocco, and the one in charge was Mohammed V. He was the grandfather of the existing king now.
Wow. So you mentioned the Allies. So you vividly describe the Allied invasion of Casablanca from your apartment window. So, what were your initial thoughts and emotions, I guess, when you saw the ships on the horizon?
Before that, Jonathan, I was extremely interested in politics and in at the war, and I was buying newspapers every day, magazines, anything I could buy with my hands on. I was very interested because we had plenty of restrictions during the war. We didn't have water, for instance.
Oh, wow.
Didn't have much of it. It was rationed, and it would the taps would be open all night to wait for water to come and reserve the quantities that we needed. And at certain times we were flooded because it arrived when we were all sleeping in the house, and it was directed to the balconies where it would run to the streets, and we would get penalized for it because it was a precious resource. So we didn't have the life was not easy because when the French lost the war, of course, the Vichy French are the ones that came to Morocco to try to install the same principles they had. This is so far away, but it's very vivid in my mind. We were hoping that the Allies would win and our situation would change. And that has lasted between 1939 to 1942, when on 8th November 1942, we had the big noise, a big fight started in the city. And the French had their fleet in the port, particularly one cruiser, a heavy cruiser, very well known at the time. It was one of the top ones in the world. Was called the Jean, which is in French Jean Bart, B-A-R-T, and he was shooting from the port, so the noise was deafening. But we were happy. We were extremely happy that our situation was going to change.
But and beforehand, there were no restrictions at all, like on the Jewish life in Morocco, right?
Yes.
There were restrictions?
There were what? I'm sorry?
Were there any restrictions on Jewish
Plenty
life?
of them. Beside the water, we were given the same portions of food that the Muslims were getting because we were locals. We were born there. Now the Europeans, the French, for instance, the Spaniards that were there, the Portuguese, there were different nationalities at the time. They were permitted to have different type of food, which was more substantial than we had.
And what you had, okay. So did your life change at all once the Allies arrived? Once the troops arrived in Casablanca?
Well, it changed it for me because I started working for the U.S. government, and one of the marvelous things that they did for us, and there were hundreds and possibly thousands of employees at the time, because they opened up after they landed successfully. They opened up about 5 bases in Morocco. The largest one was in Casablanca. It was called Memoir. It still exists to this day. Of course, not as an American base, but they stayed from 42 to 1947. During that time, I worked for them like a handful of friends of mine, because we had very little English that we learned from school, but we could speak French and Arabic and English better than many of the locals. So the landing forces could not find enough people that spoke the three languages fluently.
Right.
So that's how I ended up being.
Well, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to get to that in 1 second. Before I get to that, I was just curious because we're talking about, the Jews there. Were you aware at all what was happening to Europe's Jews when you were in Morocco?
We were in the dark in many areas. They were keeping silent on that. They were not telling us the truth. But we heard from the radio, of course, short distance radio, short waves, which was, by the way, worked by the French or the Germans, putting a lot of static on it so we couldn't hear it. So we would put our ear to the radio to try to see what's going on in the world. And that's how I learned some of the fights that existed when the British were continuing the war.
Okay. So do you believe then that if the Allies hadn't landed in Morocco, if it had not been there, that it might have reached you?
Yes, yes, I believe that.
So let's go back a second there. Okay, first let's go back to you seeing the ships again. So, what was when you first saw the ships? What was your reaction to that when you first saw the ships coming, the Allied ships?
You can say ships in capital letters because there were many of them.
Right.
The ocean part from our balcony was black with ships, all sorts of landing crafts and normal ships and warships, and the fight took place. It was all day for 3 days.
So you did see battles. You did see
we saw the battle like it will be from here, to. It was very close.
Wow.
And we could see the planes diving. The British planes were diving a lot lower than the American planes. The American planes, that was the first fight of America. It was called at the time Operation Torch. It was the first time that the entire U.S. Army and air fleet were involved in a war. Since World War II, World War I. So they were not as trained as the British were, which they were already in the wars for a few years. But the American ships caused a lot of damage to the French.
So you mentioned that you started to work with the Allies to do translation. How did that start? Did you go over to someone to volunteer? Did someone find you? How did it start to begin with, that you started working with them?
We heard through the grapevines that they were looking for people that spoke the languages. Little did we know they also looked in school and talked to school about records about people who were students, because we were all teenagers. At the time of the landing in November, because I was born in December, a month after, I was 17 years old.
Okay.
And they needed people between 19 and 26. They couldn't find very many. I told them, I lied at the time, I needed a job badly. I lied, I said I was 19 in order to get the job. And I got the job when I was 19, and I stayed with it for almost 6 years.
Wow. So what were some of your first responsibilities, and were there ever any dangerous moments while doing that?
Yes, it was dangerous, because in 1942 to 1947, when 47 until they left, during that time, I worked for the legal departments, the Judge Advocate General, they call it JAG. And during that time, I'm trying to recall exactly, there were a lot of things happening in Morocco between the French soldiers who lost the war, the Muslim soldiers who were no longer with France, and the Jews who were trying to get out of Morocco at the time. So it was a little chaotic. My job was to be a translator in any situation. It had a lot to do with accidents that were involved because of the vehicles and because of the relationship between particularly American soldiers and French soldiers in cafes and so on. There was a lot of chaos, and I could not be more happy than being in the middle and helping the U.S. Army.
That's great. So you also went to other places. I mean, you went into Europe. You went to France.
That was afterwards. It didn't happen right away at all. I worked steady for between 43, because 42 they landed. In 43, the beginning of the year, I was hired.
Right.
Between 43 until 47, when they left, that is the time that they needed us. After that, they left Morocco, and we were again with the French. So I did not continue working with them at that time, because I had a sister who had married someone who brought her over to the U.S., and she was trying to send me a visa to leave Morocco. I was anxious to leave Morocco. By then I spoke English a lot better than when I was 17.
Well, I'm going to ask that in a second. When did you first start hearing or realizing what had happened in Europe to the Jewish population in Europe?
Well, when the Americans landed, of course, very shortly after that, we heard what happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We heard what happened. In fact, Israel, I believe at that time, had some agents that came to Morocco to move all the young people to Israel. That's what they were trying to do. I was a witness of this, because I had some friends of mine from school days that immigrated to Israel and came back because of their knowledge. They came back as agents somehow.
But you learned about all this.
But at that time, I was not an American citizen. I was still a local, and I was doing everything possible to get out of that situation.
Right, but you learned about Ellis well before, Israel was founded. Because this is...
We learned about the problems of Israel, and we learned 1947 and 48.
48 was...
We learned that they were striving to have as many Jews immigrate to Israel as possible, particularly from Muslim countries.
Mm-hmm. So what difficulties? You said your sister was trying to get you to leave Morocco, and so what challenges did you have then to leave? What made...
We were the first generation of Jews that had a French education, and were confronted with the U.S. education, because we had to speak English at work. So we were speaking all the three languages. Mm-hmm. We could see the fairness of the American soldiers. We could see how much more human they were than the Muslims or even the Vichy French when we lived there. So our aim, our dreams were to get out of Morocco. And having a visa to get out of Morocco was like having $1 million in your pocket at the time.
So, right. So you went to, forgive me if I'm wrong, but you moved to Los Angeles in 1948, right? After going through New York.
That was I received my visa early in 1948, at the time when a lot of Muslims, a lot of Jews were living for Israel.
Did you ever debate? Did you ever wonder if should you go to Israel or should you go to the United States?
That was my question when I arrived in New York.
Okay.
I arrived in New York in around May when the state of Israel was declared independent at the time, after the fight that they had and so on. And there were a lot of festivities all over, even in the subways, where you had people coming in with the with the Israeli flags, and people of all sorts of people, Chinese, Indians, Afro-Americans, throwing money into the flags of Israel. And I learned that Israel became independent. And my first question is, hey, Sidney, maybe you came to the wrong country.
So what was your first impression of New York when you got there? And then
everything was big. Everything was big. I was almost going to get a neck problem because I kept turning my head to see
to look up at the skyscrapers, right.
How beautiful dressed people were. There were fur coats for women, beautiful suits for men. All the shops were full of things that I'd never seen before. To me, it was like being in a wonder garden, and particularly also the neck to see the size of the buildings. It was like a little boy, I was 22, but still naive about many, many things that you took for granted. For instance, I had little money in my pocket, and I didn't know how much things were.
Right.
I would give the large bills in order to get a glass of juice. I was impressed by how many juices in different colors. I was impressed by many, many things.
When did you move out to California then?
Well, when my sister and her husband made the plan for me to travel, I was to stay in New York about 3-4 days, I believe, at the time. And at that time, I stayed with the family of my brother-in-law, who were from Europe. And their family, I remember the name. The name was, they lived in Brooklyn. The name was Koch,
okay.
Koch. Well, the husband took me in his car and showed me a little bit the city. But getting to Brooklyn from the harbor where I arrived, I couldn't believe it took so long, about an hour and a half or so before. I believe it's that long. I remember clearly.
Well, I'm from Brooklyn, so I just...
Is it about an hour and a half or so from the harbor?
I'd say, well, look, this is later on. It's probably less than that now because of the transportation.
Because of the bridges or
right.
So.
Yes.
At the time, I thought I would never finish. In Morocco, an hour and a half was just between two cities.
Right. Well, what cultural aspects were difficult for you then? You coming from Morocco and you went to New York. What was culturally tough to adapt to the new lifestyle?
There was something in Morocco, in New York at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the time of the McCarthy period at the time. When I arrived, everybody was asking me, do you know any communists? Do you know any? To me, I didn't know what they were talking about at the time. I learned about communism and so on, but there was no politics, nothing on my part at all.
Right.
On that right. All I was desiring at my age, at 22, was have immediately go to school and get a job. That's all I wanted to do. Yeah, and help my parents who stayed behind, and help them the best way I could, because they were still under some restrictions. It was not completely lifted.
So why didn't your parents want to go with you?
First of all, it was very difficult for a whole family, and we were a large family. I had brothers and sisters who were still unmarried,
Okay.
and some were married, some not. Come from a large family, but my desire was to make some money as soon as I could, and send them, try to help them out.
What was your first job in the States?
Several jobs I had in the States, and I was astonished that when I arrived to Los Angeles, there were approximately 5 million soldiers who were coming back from the war who had no jobs. And here is this little boy, or this little teenager, I would say, or 22 years old, who looking for a job and couldn't speak the English fluently. By then, I knew a lot more than I did. But I think my lucky star, I was a go-getter.
Well, okay. So when you got out to Los Angeles, at the time, how did you compare it, the Jewish community in Los Angeles, compared to what you had left? Well, first was what you saw in New York and what you had left in Morocco.
It was we got involved very shortly after that in a war in LA, where there was a draft going on, and the draft picked up a lot of newcomers because they had to sign a document at the New York Harbor already, particularly young people like me, 22, where if the US was involved in whatever, because things were very, very difficult still. Although some soldiers were coming back, it was not a job for everybody. And the first year, to be very honest with you, my aim was to have enough money to help my parents and get money overseas. So gift packages, which half of the time some didn't get to them, and some get in a bad shape, open or something. So we were still in a situation that was not completely desirable, and there was this war that started not only in Israel but also in the Pacific Islands. We had some problems.
You talking about Korea, the Korean War?
In 1942, I believe in 1941, because I was 16 years old, I followed very much what happened in when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. I was very, very, very involved with that, getting to know the forces, getting to know what happened in Pearl Harbor. So the news I was hungry for news, always wanting to get education to the utmost.
No, I admire that. I'm the same way, always looking what's going on in the news every day. So let's go back there. I'm just curious. So when you first got out to Los Angeles, was there a large Jewish community or no? When you first got there?
When I didn't stay very long in New York.
Los Angeles, I'm saying.
Los Angeles.
Right.
There were about something like 400 or 500,000 Jews in Los Angeles. And I used to go to synagogues that were way away from the valley, because I lived not in the central of Los Angeles, but I lived near the studios, And believe it or not, the first 10 days I was in LA, I walked into Universal Studios as a 22-year-old, hoping to get a job.
Wow.
I hope that, and I asked if there's anybody that spoke French, because I was much more fluent in French than I was in English. But I had I was a daring boy walking, and we didn't have any guards or anything, but by the studios at the time. And my sister's house was almost across the street from the Universal Studios.
So you joined, it's after the wartime. I mean, you joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, right, in Los Angeles?
No, that happened. No, I had no idea to join the Army whatsoever. I had 5 years of, almost 6 years of service to the U.S. government as a local, as a Moroccan employee, and I had beautiful certificates. I visited some of the people that I worked for in New York. I visited my boss, who was a captain, and he lived in Brooklyn, and his father was a rabbi in Brooklyn, and the most miraculous thing that happened to me in New York was when I visited this captain. His name was Goldfarb. Joseph Goldfarb.
Okay.
He was very interested in showing me his home, his synagogue, everything. I was in New York only for 4 days. And then he accompanied me to the train, to the subway, where I could take the subway to return to where I was. And in the subway, we started talking about someone who was a master sergeant who I worked with very closely under the direction of the captain, who was also Jewish, by the way. I was anxious to see where he was, where I could find him. And my captain, who was the commanding officer in Casablanca, told me there is a book in New York where you can find the name of all the lawyers. I had no idea about this, and we talked about his name was Wartel, Wartel. He must have changed his name or something. But anyway, we talked about him. In the next station, I said goodbye to the captain, because I was going to be leaving in a day and a half or so afterwards for California by train. And we said goodbye. I believe the station was DeKalb. It's called DeKalb.
Yeah, DeKalb.
All of these things I picked up 70 years ago.
Right.
It's amazing that I can still remember. Anyway, I'm sitting in the train. My commanding, my captain gets off. And this Wartel Powell was his name, walks into the train, into the wagon, into the subway. The doors open, and here comes this guy that I was thinking of. To this day, to me, it's a miraculous in a city like New York.
Right.
He walks in dressed in civilian clothes, and I'm sitting right in front of the door that opened, and he walks in. He looks at me. He points to me. He said, "Sidney, what are you doing here?"
Wow.
And I don't know. I seem to think very strongly that we have a path. No, there's a path established for us ever since we are born that directs our path. There's something that I believe very strongly. But that's the most miraculous things that happened to me.
Fantastic story. Yes. So let me move ahead a little bit. Let's talk
So,
about. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
so of course, he took me to see his fiancée. And he was very proud to show me and to say to his friends that he met Sidney from Casablanca in the subway.
Incredible.
Well, a day or so after I met his wife, so altogether, I said 4 days. All of these things happened in 4 days. I was in a train between New York and Chicago, and I had a combination ticket. I arrived to Chicago, and then I take a correspondence. The other train. At the time, it was called El Capitan. Train was an absolute beauty. I'd never seen anything like that. And little did I know that I missed the train because our train was late. And I had to spend 3 hours in Chicago. And that same train that I missed had an accident and several
wow.
people were killed. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was miracle number 2.
Sure.
So somebody, something was with me.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to jump ahead a little bit, excuse me, to talk about the founding of Em Habanim, the Sephardic Congregation in North Hollywood.
Don't you want to hear anything about the draft?
Oh, sure.
Em Habanim came many years afterwards. The time that I worked for the United States government, it's after I got married.
Mm-hmm.
And it started in 1950. It started in anyway. I was in America working with a firm for ribbons, and my ideas, my thoughts were going back to Morocco with some money and marry a girlfriend that I loved very much since I was 16 years old and who did not immigrate. That was another problem I had. So the years that I worked in Morocco were added to the years I worked in Los Angeles to make it 40. And because part of those years, by the way, were not as an American citizen and were refused by GSA because I was not an American citizen, and therefore they could not count the 4 years, almost 6 years. I get mixed up sometimes, it's so far away. But this story I know very well because it's part of my life. It's part of my life. If I remember, the draft was in 1950.
Okay.
In 1951, 52, they were calling a lot of personnel because the draft was going on, and I was called to serve in the U.S. Army. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, I was not a citizen. I was Moroccan born. I had no knowledge whatsoever about drafting or something, but I was called in a camp near San Francisco. It was called Camp Ord, and I was declared to be 1A. 1A at the time was ready for service. Mm-hmm. I was in a dilemma. I was not in Los Angeles at all for a few weeks when I was to be drafted already. I loved the U.S. Army. I had plenty of experience working for the U.S. government for the Army than any of the youngsters that were called. But going to my sister and her husband, they said, Sidney, what do you know about this country that you want to serve? What do you know? You just came in. and there was a war in Korea, and there were a lot of soldiers being killed. I think we lost about 50,000 soldiers all total, and I was in a dilemma. But I heard that there were also other ways that I could obtain a deferment. So I jumped on the deferment to push as much as possible and have a little more time here to get on my feet. So the deferment came when somebody in Morocco was giving a bar mitzvah, and I was invited. I collected every penny that I could, and I left America after 1 year here. I left, I returned to Morocco. Then I understood fully how much a mistake it was. When I returned to Morocco after 1 year, after having spent an experienced time in America, but this nephew of mine who was having bar mitzvah in Rabat ordered some things from Casablanca, because Rabat is about an hour and a half from Casablanca, and I was to go to Rabat to attend the service. I didn't have a vehicle. When I left America, I had a beautiful Bel Air Chevy 1953 purchased for me for a lady that lost her husband, and I was erecting her factory. Well, it happened that I worked for this man during vacation time in Casablanca. He had a garage. He let me use one of the vehicles he had. It was a Jeep. I have one here that I keep exactly, if you see it, like this.
Okay. Yes.
Somebody gave it to me because it reminds me of a lot of things. Well, the Jeep was full. I had two friends of mine, and here's Sidney going to Rabat with a Jeep loaded, a tire in the back, because that's where I used to put the tire in the back. Two friends of mine, we were all tied up like this. It was raining. I took a turn, very slight turn, and the Jeep rolled 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
3 times. Only after 70 years, I heard, by going to a museum in LA, a Patton Museum, I learned that the Jeep had a lot of faults during the war.
Wow.
And I went into Google and I found out that the faults were the Jeep was not at a certain speed, the Jeep turns.
Oh my gosh.
The brakes. Only after so many years, I learned that it was not my fault.
Right.
Because here I'm sitting, I'm turning with the vehicle, and it returned on its wheels. Everything was pulled out. I was injured in my ankle with a extinguisher. I'm sorry. The word looks like a distinguish, but it's extinguisher that was on the left side of the Jeep. On the side. Even in the museum recently, I told them that your Jeep has the extinguisher on the wrong side, on the other side. Well, anyway, what happened is I was injured in the ankle. I had a split bone. That's how they describe my illness. That split bone kept me out of the army. That's miracle number. Miracle 3 was the flip over. Miracle 4 was my ankle. So I said to Morocco to start to walk better, because I couldn't walk very well. It stayed for a while, and I returned to the States after 1 year with the same situation that the year before. I had no job, I had nothing. And I had to start over again, which I did. And I did with success. And it was only between 1949 and 1954 that I worked here. I made some money. I made situation. I got education. Then I went back to get married.
So
No,
the girl that you liked, you wound up marrying her.
huh?
The girl that you liked, you wound up
Yes.
marrying her.
Yeah, exactly. However, is right. When I married her, another miracle on the negative side happened to me. The lady that I was keeping the factory for, she was a very rich lady who gave me a position, a car, everything that you could dream of, sent me a letter that she was selling the factory, and I was without a job. So I married a beautiful girl from good, beautiful family. I was happy to see my folks, and I was preparing the documents for her to come with me to the US. And I was without a job, and this happened during my honeymoon
Wow. Wow.
in one of the best hotels in Marrakesh, which now is a great city in Morocco. That was the time I returned to the army. Here's another miracle. My brother, younger brother, who was a soldier who worked in America when I sent for him to immigrate from Morocco. He worked in USR. He knew the chief of personnel. They needed somebody who was an American citizen, who spoke English, Arabic, and French fluently. And that's why I was selected. It was in 1954 to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The camp where I was assigned was in the middle of the Moroccan Medina. The Medina is the center of the Muslim city,
Right.
and the Muslims were fighting the French for independence. It was in the 50s, and I had to go with my car. By then, I had an American car with the U.S. plates on it and the picture of the Sultan that the French removed from the job. I had the Sultan on my car in order to be allowed to go through the crowds that were demonstrating against the French.
Wow.
So my destiny was very much varied, very unique, and I had to fight my way time and again. But I worked from 1954. I got married in 1954. I started working for the U.S. Army, the Corps of Engineers. After 3 years in Morocco, they called all the employees to tell them that they were moving out of Morocco because of the conditions between the Arabs and the French, and they were relocating in Europe. And that's why I was given a chance, either to stay in Morocco or have no job, either to return to America with no job, or
Right.
or go to Italy they said for 1 year, but it lasted 10 years. So I speak Italian fluently. My children were born in Italy. I'm a different guy now, I'm saying.
Well,
In talking to you, I'm looking at I have 20 awards from all over the world. The latest one from our president. He wrote me one. His signature is half of the page already.
wow. Well, I want to ask about it before, because I don't want to run out of time. I wanted to ask about Em Habanim. So, what
Okay,
inspired
well,
you?
during my time in LA, having this experience of organization and wanting to do something for the various different Moroccans that were here, because by then a lot of young families immigrated. Not too many, but we were spread out in the city in different synagogues. Mostly of them were, of course, Orthodox, and and we wanted something Orthodox also because that's the way we were raised, and mostly of them were from European Jews that had been here for centuries. Oh, so
And there was a large
I wanted
Sephardic
to form
contingent as
something
well?
Sephardic,
Right.
typical from Morocco, and I directed my thoughts toward. We had no money, no rabbi, no scrolls, no locale. And we built Em Habanim. It took us 10 years, and now the place is worth about $15 million.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So,
It's another miracle,
and you've seen the community by the synagogue, like, grow over the years. Now it's a large community there, right?
In here, in LA, right now we have about 600.
And the Sephardic community as well.
The Sephardic community was raised, yeah, but we have the nicest synagogue because we started 50 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And there were some philanthropists who helped us, and they continue to help. And then we had committees, and I was the president twice, and I had to fight my ways. You get 3 Moroccans together, you have 10 opinions.
So what prompted you to write the memoir?
Jonathan, to a large extent, all the contents of the books are the results of my letters, which I found by chance after she passed away, opened her things. It was hidden to me. I didn't know that she had kept every letter. And I opened a metal box, and they all were thrown on the floor. There were over 100 of them.
Oh, wow.
The dates, the time, what happened to me. It was a complete book by itself. So it was not difficult for me to refer to the letters, and I did quite a bit.
How emotional to go through them afterwards.
It was very, very difficult. It traced my life from A to Z. And even now, I still have a book with all of them inserted. But she started writing me when we were separated for a few days. When from Italy, she visited her parents, and I could see how much I meant to her. It was the first, yeah. It was difficult for the women at that time to express themselves, but she would write 1 or 2, and I would write 20.
This sounds familiar for me in a lot of things.
It's an important part of my story, Jonathan.
Right.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely fantastic. No, it's an amazing story.
Jonathan, I'm being open with you and speaking to my past and everything. I love to do this, and you seem to ask me the right questions at the right time, and there's so many things associated. It's unique that you jump to the right questions, and but I'm very, very proud to be where I am. I am very proud that I served the army that has been good to me. Et voila in French means that's it.
Absolutely fascinating life. It's just incredible, the stories that you have, and well worth reading for the memoir as well.
You can fish out from it whatever would be of use, because my target really is to interest people, because if you know things that you don't share, they're lost, they're gone.
I agree with you, yes.
They're gone. I am one that loves to share things. I love to share.
I thank you for sharing with me. So thank you.
Jonathan, in this little, what is it? What time is it? It's 2:00 already.
Yeah.
in what is it? In 1 hour, I wrapped up my life, and it's not easy.
No, it's not wrapping up your life. If we want to talk about your life, we could be here, for days, and I would listen to it. But I thank you.
But Jonathan, I'd like to meet you in person.
Absolutely, I would love that.
I invite you to come to my house. I have a big house on Malone.
When I am in California, I will make sure my business to get
in California. You are the right man for the right job, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it sincerely. It's an honor getting to speak with you.
Same here.
So let me wrap us up here. So again, this has been the Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Sidney Chriqui, and the book is As Time Goes By. And please like, comment, and
In
subscribe.
French, c'est mille fois merci. 1,000 times thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.